welcome to the Voice of Freeport podcast. This is our first episode. And given the local elections that are coming soon, we thought it would be a good idea to talk to the candidates for mayor. We did, of course, reach out to our current incumbent mayor, Jody Miller. We have unfortunately not gotten a response from her yet. If she responds in the future, we'll certainly endeavor to do a separate interview with her. For today, we have Ronnie who is the Democrat candidate for mayor of Freeport. And with me, sort of acting as a co-host, is Chloe, whose name I haven't said out loud yet. I think it's Zuberbuhler?
Yep.
Chloe Zuberbuhler, who is a candidate for Freeport Township. I want to start, we're mostly going to be talking to Ronnie here, but Chloe, I want to start out with just, you introducing yourself, let us know, why you're running for Township, and just give us a little intro on who you are, and maybe what honey church is or business that you're running here in Freeport.
Yep.
And then we'll go from there and start our conversation with Ronnie.
Got it. Absolutely. So my name is Chloe Zuberbuhler. I am a Freeport native who moved back in recent years to pursue my dreams of renovating buildings in the downtown district, as well as starting my own business, which is Honey Church, where I source and sell vintage furniture and home goods online, and hope to soon house the showroom for that in my downtown property. I am running for Freeport Township Trustee because I wanted to become more active in my community, as well as represent the younger demographic here in Freeport. Township acts as pretty much a checks and balances system for our local government. We oversee budget creation, property assessment, and develop public service programs that directly benefit our citizens. I have a background in similar social services, passionate about community development, and I'm really just looking forward to offering a fresh, progressive perspective to helping Freeport forward.
Awesome. Thank you. Like I said, unfortunately, we weren't able to get Jody Miller, our incumbent mayor, but we do have a Democratic candidate for Mayor, Ronnie Bush. He's here. He's ready to talk about the issues that are facing Freeport. So Ronnie, why don't you just give us a little intro, who you are, why you're running for mayor, and generally what you hope to accomplish as the leadership of this town.
Well, my name is Ronnie Bush, and I'm a lifelong resident of Freeport, Illinois. Served on the city council for 22 years, and now on the county board. Just got reelected in November to serve another 4-year term. I've had the knowledge of city government because I've been there before. The difference is now is underneath the city managerial government. But since being out campaigning, I'm hearing a lot of concerns about streets, high water bills, and I think it's true that I'm getting the feel that the city is more divided than it has been. That I really want to run to unify our community, to come up with one city and one vision, and that is to be able to represent all the citizens of Freeport. Not just a certain segment of the group, but all the citizens of Freeport.
Awesome, thank you. So we have a few topics we're gonna touch on. I don't necessarily expect it to be sort of I ask a question, you give me an answer, I ask a question, you give me an answer. If you want to open up a discussion on any one topic, certainly feel free to just talk about it. So I want to start off with policing here in Freeport. First of all, I'd like to get your thoughts on the Freeport Police Department. What improvements you think maybe might need to be made, or issues that you think should be addressed within Freeport's Police Department. Of course, there are a lot of people in our community who would say that there's a lack of diversity, and that's I think what a lot of people are interested in hearing about, what kind of solutions there could be for that. Both in the police and fire departments, there seems to be a lack of representation of the makeup of the city. So, what are your thoughts on the Freeport Police Department, on what improvements you think could be made, and the lack of
it's no secret, and I've stated it numerous times before, that my heart and soul go out to the police department. Because my dad used to be a police officer. In fact, he was the second African American police officer on the police department in 1959. And even then, there was issues. That too, whereas, as I said, that my heart and soul go out to the police department, but I'm not going to turn an eye to the injustice that's being done. They always been a concern of lack of diversity on the police department. I think we need to step back and look at how to address that issue, because we keep doing the same thing all the time, and you're getting the same results. A lot of times, you're going to have find somebody that really want to be a police officer. I think that we somehow know you have to network with other communities who have, like Rockford. I look at Rockford, there's a lot of African American women and men on the police department. Why not sit and talk with them and feel how they were able to recruit African Americans, not just African Americans, but other races as well, to the police department. And maybe bring them over here to talk with the young folks and stuff like that. And I think also too, as a city, we need to start investing in our youth to really get them inspired to be involved in city government, but just be involved in the city as well. So, but another thing too is I think that we need to update our training. I think we need to go through cultural diversity and sensitive courses. And if you found to be racial profiling, I think you need to take some type of mandated unconscious bias test. And things going to have to change to be able to have a better police department. And I was pretty disturbed when I got a call that it just said that I was for defunding the police. I look at that as being a distraction to keep me from doing what I want to do. And I think that the defunding to me is nothing but a scare tactic. It's not really talking about doing away with the police and all like that. It's talking about funding that they get to use it in other ways of helping the police department. I'm a big supporter of community policing. I think when I was on call before, it worked. To where you got the police officer out the car in the neighborhood, talking to people, building that trust. That's what I think is need to happen. We need to get back to that. And I thought the mayor said that it was a federal grant program, so that when it went out, they did away with it. That's true, but it worked. So therefore, use some funding that you do give towards that. You might not be able to do the complete community policing, but somehow get the officer out the car in the neighborhood.
And I would agree that, and I did watch that forum as well. And that was one thing that I sort of noted in my head was, so we were able to do this because of some funding that we had from the program. And then the funding went away, so we just stopped doing it. The way I see it is, we have the funding to be able to try something and see if it worked, and it worked. So when the funding went away, we should have found another way to fund it. So that would be it. So I think we're in agreement on that. Chloe, do you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, I guess in terms of, the topic of defunding the police, it's an interesting one because, as somebody who saw massive military vehicles riding to the east side during the Black Lives Matter protest weeks, you look at the city of Freeport budget and the disproportion between what goes to police officers versus other community endeavors. In terms of fighting crime, rather than fixing the symptom, oftentimes we have to also consider fixing the root of the problem. That means more money towards community programs. That means more money towards educational systems and housing and, just a better way of life for our people to begin with. So it's something to consider. While it doesn't mean get rid of all police officers, it could also mean what can we allocate our funds to that will, better the community as a whole. So we have less crime.
And I think it's been a little bit unfortunate, some of what I would call, so I think people who have pushed, for good reason, the defund the police movement, unfortunately I think they just suffer from bad marketing.
Yeah.
It's a misnomer, right? Because nobody's actually saying, let's take all funding away from them. Well, at least most people aren't saying, let's take all the funding away from the police. So that doesn't make sense. You can't keep communities safe if you have police departments with no funding. We would just like the funding that they do get to be diverted to more useful programs and ways of helping the community. And I'm glad that you brought up community policing because I had that written down anyways. That's something that I am definitely interested in seeing if we can push forward in Freeport. I think it would be a huge benefit. And also I'll say, you know, when I was a kid, I thought I wanted to be a cop. Even a few years ago, I think, I still thought I wanted to be a cop. But, you know, I was sort of disenchanted by, me myself being a minority. I'm Mexican American. I've seen a lot of really unfortunate behavior from the police in a lot of different places that I lived, and that's, it pushed me out of that idea that was something I wanted to be a part of, and that's unfortunate, and that's, something I think you're speaking to, Ronnie, is getting, nobody reached out to me as a youth to try to show me that, becoming part of law enforcement would be a good thing for me and the community and stuff like that. Nobody ever came to my school and, tried to push me in that direction in a positive way. The police officers weren't getting out of their cars and talking to us and letting us know that they weren't the bad guys. So I agree that's something that we need to work towards in Freeport, is building a relationship between the police and the people in the community, and especially the youth in this community, because there could be kids out there right now who want to be cops and don't know that that's something that they can do or should do.
I think you touched on this a little bit in the beginning of your statement of, how Rockford has a better, system in terms of getting more diverse police force. So do you have any thoughts specifically on what Freeport can do or what might be hindering, Freeport citizens from joining the police department, especially those of color?
Well, I know a couple of police officers in Rockford, and I've talked to them. And they were willing to come over and talk with the youth about being a police officer. And also to talk about some of the obstacles that they have to go through with, but again, still, it's a job. It's something that you can be able to live off of and do. But also, too, you got to have in your heart what you do want to do. Like you said, you want it to be. If somebody had just took the time out and reached to you and showed you, you might be a police officer today.
Yes.
So it's just the fact that community policing works. And you touched on it, they so quick to go get military equipment. How is that building the trust, building the neighborhood, when you see a big armed tank and everything else running down the street? How is that building some type of trust relationship? It's not. All we're doing is splitting the community in half.
And scary.
And scare people. And use the scare tactic. It's time out for that. It's time out for that. I mean, because I don't want to get up on the subject, but get back to social justice. That's not going to go away. It should stay. I mean, because look at what's going on now with the Asian American. Right. I mean, for a while it was us, the African Americans. Now it's up to the Asian American. All because of the pandemic. So I mean, I just feel that right now we have no one in leadership to really try to unify this community. Because we got some good people in this community. Right. But it's just fact you got to reach out to them to really encourage them to get involved and build that trust. Mayor with the city manager position, that freed that person up to be able to get out in the community. Because they no longer run the day-to-day operation. And one thing that the article that the former alderwoman and co-chair of the city managerial, in her article in the paper, we not one time heard anything back from City Hall, how city managerial program position worked. Was it good? Was it bad? What was their reaction to it? How would they be able to work with that? Not one time have we heard anything. And I consider that lack of leadership, when you don't reach back and let your people know what's going on.
Transparency is definitely key.
So, Speaking of COVID, there was one question that we got on Facebook that kind of relates to one of the topics I wanted to touch on anyway, which was the pandemic-related impact on small businesses. First of all, what are your thoughts regarding the COVID impact on small businesses? And do you think that it's been handled well by the city, or is there, would you handle it differently in any way?
Well, I think for one, my heart goes out to the small business because they got really hit pretty hard behind that, especially our restaurants and everything else. But at the same time, we're not no scientists, so I think we have to really rely pretty heavy on the scientists. Did they know what really to do? No, I would say no. They know about it. It was just more or less a day-to-day thing. But I think that we still have to rely on the scientists in our health department. So that's where I would have put my trust in with the scientists and everything else. Do we like to wear masks? No, I don't like wearing it. But at the same time, if that's going to help prevent spreading it or me getting it, because I have an underlying condition, I'm a diabetic. And if that's going to help save my life, then yeah, I will have to wear it. And also too, just other people, you have to be concerned about other people's life as well. I just think that if we had really went along with that's really.
Oh, okay.
It's really, that's not. If they went along with the scientists had asked, I think we could have came out of this a lot sooner. But just the fact that a lot of us was fighting it, the reason why we ended up the way we ended up. That's just my opinion.
What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think it has been detrimental, so we'll see, how we can come out of it, but I think it was, inspiring to see a lot of the businesses get creative, especially at the beginning, but it is good to be seeing that we're kind of nearing the end of that, but I guess I'm curious on what your thoughts are in terms of, how Freeport handled, the city handled that, and, if you were to have been in a position like mayor at that point, maybe what would have been your priorities, especially in helping small businesses?
Well, I think for one, I wouldn't have been so quick to go around the other townships and to write this letter to the governor requesting him to lift the restrictions. Because and they say that you are doing it for the citizens of Freeport. Did you get asked what your thoughts was? Did you get asked what your thoughts was? No.
Yeah.
So why write a letter saying you're doing it out of concern for the people of Freeport when you never one time question anybody about what their feel was on this? You're supposed to be the voice of the people.
Yeah.
You're supposed to act on their behalf. But yet still you go off and try to be this big whatever. To write a letter to the governor asking him to lift the restrictions on that. And I think that's the reason why a lot of businesses didn't do follow the protocol because of it. Because there was no leadership from City Hall on it. So they just did what they wanted to do.
Related to, this question that we got on Facebook was related to both the protests that happened downtown last year and also how businesses that have decided not to heed COVID restrictions and warnings, how they were not dealt with. So I guess, what I need, I don't really word that as eloquently as the person on Facebook did, but basically what they were getting at was that there was a large, very visible, obvious response to the BLM protests last year. And the point that they were getting at was that there didn't seem to be much of any response to businesses deciding to go against COVID restrictions and CDC guidelines. The concern basically being that the mayor, City Hall, none of the leadership in Freeport seemed interested in doing anything to push back against businesses who were deciding not to follow the guidelines. I guess the question is, what would you have done, or what do you think could have been done, or should have been done to make sure that businesses are following the guidelines and making sure that we're keeping everybody safe?
Well, I think, once again, I have to really rely on the health department and CDC guidelines. And they go with it. Now, would it have been meant to mandating face masks? Yes, I probably would have done it. But I think I would make myself more visible, more transparent, to let them know that what has been asked, you must do. Because I've seen numerous times in the newspaper and Facebook where the administration was at places, going to places, never had a face mask on. So how can you really encourage or ask someone else to do something when you don't follow what you're supposed to do? So in other words, as I stated in the form, you can't just talk about it, you gotta be about it. Right. In other words, your actions speak a lot louder than words.
Right.
And to me, there was no leadership, none. But when it came to the Black Lives Matter thing, they had the police and everything. And I thought that they handled that wrong as well. Because I remember the first one, when they had downtown, they called a bunch of African American ministers down and everything else. I thought that the day that incident happened with George Floyd, that's when they should have taken action. By that I mean they should have called people in to talk about what had happened.
Yeah.
To figure out the way how we could be able to handle this in case something would happen in Freeport. Instead of waiting till the day of to try to do something. It's too much reaction, because when you react, it costs more money. To be proactive, you save money. And this not what's going on. You get too much reaction instead of being proactive.
And did you have something you wanted to add?
Well, I guess the only thought that I had was, if anything, I do think that our administration did have strong opinions about the pandemic, as how that person had said maybe it felt like they didn't compared to the Black Lives Matter. I just think they necessarily weren't in the right direction. If anything, the letter that went out was a letter of encouragement for businesses to not heed advice from the experts. And in fact, it might have felt for some as a step forward, we're going to get out of this, we're going to stop, following the guidelines and everything will just be fine again. But in fact, it felt even more counterproductive because at that same time, our rates in Freeport went from 3 a day to 50 a day right when that went out. It wasn't the time to open back up and, take a stand in the opposite direction. And how you said earlier, maybe we could have gotten out of this sooner if leadership had taken a stance in the right direction and said, let's follow the protocols, let's listen to the experts, and do our part to help our community and those around us, and we could have been out of it sooner.
Yeah, and certainly I would, it's a tough issue because I certainly understand, being a small business owner myself, Chloe, you're a small business owner, I understand when you're suddenly put in a position where the restrictions are such that you almost can't do business, and in some cases simply can't do business. Your options are, some people felt their options were go against the guidelines or go out of business. So I guess personally, my question would be, is there something the city could have, should still do to help businesses be able to, follow the guidelines that we were supposed to, and potentially even shut down if they need to, if there's outbreaks, but not go out of business and still be able to come back?
I think that they should have worked with our local institution, financial institution, to figure out ways of accruing some kind of incentive for businesses to be able to stay in business. And also, too, that's what you got the Greater Freeport Partnership for. Sit and talk with them, see what could be done to help the small businesses. Instead of fighting against it, you have to find ways to solve the situation. And I think they took it that by sending this letter to Springfield was going to be able to solve the situation. What all it was going to do is make the situation a lot worse.
And it also, divides the community as far as, the conversations that are happening, whether in person in break rooms at workplaces or on Facebook or wherever it is, everybody has an opinion about it. And this is just my opinion. I just think that it's a bit divisive to put out something like that half the people are not going to agree with. And I'm not going to say half is an exact ratio, but you know what I mean. A lot of people will agree with that decision to put out that letter to Springfield, and a lot of people won't. And now we have the community fighting with each other again. You brought up the Greater Freeport Partnership. Again, another thing I had written down, so that's great. I'll be honest, I don't know as much about it. What I know is the slogan, basically, I guess. Jody Miller has said that the Greater Freeport Partnership is the one-stop shop for businesses to go to for all the resources for whatever they may need with regards to getting help from the city or stuff like that. I don't know as much about it. Chloe, you're a little bit more knowledgeable about the Greater Freeport Partnership.
Yeah.
I don't know if you want to touch on that.
Sure. So I'm not an expert on the GFP, but I have interacted with them in the past quite a bit, and I think the biggest thing for them is obviously that they're looking to help with economic development, especially in terms of small businesses, as well as drive tourism to Freeport as we kind of see that excel forward. And I guess for our questions for you would be, how can the city work with the Greater Freeport Partnership to excel those two areas for us?
And I had the opportunity to sit down and talk with Mark Williams about this. I think for one, they need to change their makeup of their board.
Okay.
To be more of a diverse board.
Sure.
Number two is, I think they need to better their communication to all businesses, small or large. Make this a really present, to be able to help, One thing I brought up that I would like to do the Greater Freeport Partnership is to have a business summit with all the businesses to hear about some of the obstacles that they have gone through and what overcome them. And then maybe even also to invite ones in who is interested by going into businesses. And that way maybe we could create some type of mentorship for people who want to go into businesses. And then as far as TIP, that has been another concern that was brought up to me too, is that a lot of businesses sometimes don't know what TIP is and when it's available. I think we need, as a citywide and county, we need to maybe, well, I'm just going to speak for the city, maybe create a special website for TIP that automatically will go out to all businesses, let them know what TIP is, when it's available, and the contact person who they can call for any questions that they may have. It just, a lot of people don't like changes, but I think the changes, now's the time to make that change. Because businesses have been hit so hard with the COVID that we need to do everything we can to make sure that they survive. Sure enough, you want other businesses to come in, but I think right now the major focus is retaining what we have now.
I really see the GFP as acting as a resource for small businesses, and then that liaison between the small businesses and the city, so they can kind of take in all the information for small businesses, understand what the themes and the main points are, and maybe even prioritize those, and then take those to the city, work with the city to say, what can we as a whole do to benefit, everybody and our citizens and our employees more. I think in that term, because I feel like a lot of the time somebody might just contact somebody from the city or contact somebody from the GFP, and there's a lot of, maybe miscommunication or hearing the same thing twice versus creating that strong relationship between the two entities where, we can all really benefit from that program.
And then also too, the city is heavily invested in the Greater Freeport Partnership, and we need to continue on working with it. One thing that I thought was a great idea when they had to combine all these committees together had was they still had the same people involved in that. So if they didn't, when they were to do it, when they was off on their own though, how they gonna be able to, what's gonna change now when you still got the same people involved in it?
All right, well, the next thing I want to touch on is something that everybody's going to ask about. It's the first thing that everybody asks about when we're having discussions about local issues, and that is the roads. And I know that you've got plenty to say about the roads. I'll tell you from my perspective. I've been in Freeport since 2010, and so in this just over 10 years. Every street that I've lived on in this town has, with the exception of where I live now, because I live over on American and it's pretty decent over there, but most places that I've lived in this town, the streets look like they've been hit with mortar fire. Massive holes that you have to swerve around. And I know you guys touched on this during the forum for the League of Women's Voters, and I know what Jody's position is, which is that they've done, however many miles of road work. They have all of this other road work planned. The sense that I always get from it is sort of the don't worry, we're working on it type of thing. But to me, it seems like even if you do, you see crews out there working certain areas and stuff, sure, it seems like something's happening. But the same roads for a decade plus still look the way they look, and they look even worse the next year after all the plows come through. And if they do fix it, it's usually a cold patch, and then that just gets dug up again, and we end up in an even worse position. Anyways, I guess my question would be, with so many of the roads, so many of the worst streets in town being that way for so long, and especially a street like Adams where you're coming straight into the downtown area from that corridor, I guess what do you think could be done, should be done to help speed up the process of getting those roads fixed? Because there's a lot of us in Freeport who are really sick of having to replace our tires and get our suspension fixed and swerving around potholes. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, for one, I had to really laugh when she sent her first letter stating that she did 2.3 square feet. Million, whatever. So I did the calculation on that, so she's saying that they've done 14 miles. But she didn't specify whether it was the 1 year or the 4 years she's been there. But the major question is, what street did you do?
Yeah.
Because when you ride around, I tell you one that I know that they've done, and that's 4th Street. And ride down 4th Street, you better be careful. Because just like you said, you might throw your suspension out, you're going to lose a tire, because you hit a manhole, you tear your car. And no curves, because if you're going to be paving the street, you should start, I would say curve should start from sidewalk to sidewalk because of ADA now. And that also too, that's improving, somewhat helping improving the neighborhood too. When I was on before, the city was only getting maybe $45K per month in motor fuel tax. Now the city is getting not only the motor fuel tax, but they get rebuilt on noise. And the motor fuel transportation bill was taking over $1 million now, to where they can be able to get a lot of streets done. She got in the paper about filling in potholes. These are not potholes. These are not potholes. I did put on my campaign page, and my Facebook campaign page, the 10 questions that the lady asked me. And I would highly suggest everyone to go to that. Question 2, I address how I would do with the roads. And that is, first of all, you have to come up with a plan about addressing it. She mentioned she had to take a 20-year plan. I'm saying a 10-year plan. That way, when you get done with when you plan your 10-year out, and when you get done with year 1, you start planning for year 11. That way, you got a 10-year plan. When you get year 2, now you plan year 12. Always got a 10-year plan.
Sort of a plan of constant maintenance.
Right. And that way you make sure that but you gotta stay on course because this is not an overnight thing. This ain't gonna be, I figure out the way I'm talking about doing it's gonna take about 40 years to get it done. But you gotta start at the worst area first.
Yeah.
And then work your way down. Adams Street should have been done before they did Flow Street. Because the Flow Street with the water main running into Adams Street. Adams Street pipes as bad as all over. Now you got new water main on flow running into something that basically gonna got to be taken care of. Adams Street should have been done. I was upset to hear at the March 1st meeting where they got $1 million to do Empire Street from Park Public Boulevard to Perry. So that tells me that across West Street is no concern to me.
And this is just, my personal opinion. I drive Empire a lot. And, if we're comparing, what needs the work most, I think I would prioritize Adams over.
It's a truck route where semis come in on it and use all the time. So Adams Street should have been, now the climate is supposed to get done. She just had just in the newspaper when they got received a grant and all that went on. But City Freeport always had been good about getting grants anyway. So that means she's trying to make this out like wow, but it ain't wow because it's not going to be used properly. Like they need to prioritize where they need to go with it, and they're not doing that. Yeah. I agree. Adams Street should have been done last year. They should have worked on that, but they haven't. Keep putting it off. They keep putting it off. I grant since this issue is coming up, you probably will see something going on because of it.
Sure.
Because it's election time.
Yeah.
Then after the election's over with, it's going to go back to the same old usual thing.
I guess to touch on some of the points that you made, it is pretty frustrating to see the disproportionate allocation of funds when it comes to roads. It kind of makes a statement to me, like you said, the West Street divide or even the Pecatonica River divide, Adams Street, Flow Street, the street over by Mrs. Mike said, I can't remember, in that historic district of the first houses in Freeport, are like a really important space. All these spots, I have to wonder where the priority is when it comes to fixing these streets and who they have in mind necessarily when they make those repairs. I feel like there's a huge community of people who are being kind of left in the background and having to just deal with it versus perhaps our more privileged citizens getting the benefit of these funds.
And since you bring that up, I would agree. It seems like I don't like to say like the less off neighborhoods, but the areas of town where, let's say, there is a higher concentration of lower income people, right? Those roads don't seem to get addressed, and you have to think about what that means for those people, right? So you figure lower income people generally have older, more susceptible to falling apart cars, right? And you're forcing them to drive on roads that they can barely drive on. They can't afford these car repairs. They can't afford to move to an area where they have nicer roads. And I think that it is necessary for the city to do something about that for those people. And I do wonder why that's not so much.
Right.
I don't want to say that I know that it's not on the minds of the people making the decisions, but it's not obvious that it is. And I think that there should be some transparency. If you're going to decide to do this road, tell me why.
Yeah.
And also, I think that people should have a say.
And I'm glad you mentioned that because that's one thing, once again, I will encourage everybody to go to my campaign page. That once you put the plan together, then you take it to the neighborhood and present that to the people in the neighborhood. And then give them opportunity of what they would like to see done. And then incorporate that into that plan. Now, I will say, crazy as it sounds, you got some people that like to have the streets rough. Some reason is because less traffic. experience before. Cause I experienced that. In fact, one gentleman on my Facebook page said he'd rather have his wife. You know? So you do have people that like to have the streets run, you know.
Yeah.
But I think the majority of the people in Freeport are sick and tired of running over Rough Street. And then also too, if people really see you doing something, they wouldn't have a problem about paying an extra tax or whatever. You know, I look at a tax. I don't like taxes either. But I look at taxes as an investment.
Yeah.
When you invest in something, you look for something out of it. And right now, people are not seeing nothing coming out of it.
Absolutely.
Right. And, you know, touching on taxes, not something I had written down, but just, reminds me, you know, when I moved to Freeport, my water bill was, my water bill was about $20 a month. You know, one person, I was always one person and a dog. So we didn't use that much water, and it was, you know, it was a cool, easy $20 bill every month. Gradually, it got to the point where it is now, where I'm paying, you know, $60 to $80 for the same water usage, and so much of that is coming from the capital improvement tax that keeps getting added to. And, you know, to your point, if I knew that that extra money was going to something like fixing the roads that I have to drive on every day, absolutely, take it. I'll give you an extra $20 on top of it. I don't care, as long as you fix the roads. But when we're paying all this extra money on our water bills and we're not seeing whatever improvement we're apparently paying for, it's
And I'm glad you brought that up. That capital improvement plan was put in place to repair the water and sewer lines. Which I think that water and sewer lines and paving roads go hand in hand. Because it don't make no sense to go in and repair the water and sewer lines. Or pave the streets. Then a year later you gotta go back and dig it up to repair the water and sewer line.
I think that's something a lot of people don't think about.
Right.
They don't think of them as being connected issues.
Right. So they're both connected. If you're gonna repair the streets, you first gotta do the water and sewer lines. Just take care of that. That plan was put in place, and I knew that the person mayor at that time voted against it. Her reasoning was she wanted to wait on the city manager, he might have more knowledge and everything else about it, which didn't make no sense to me. And I went on the council at the time, and it didn't make no sense to me. To me, it was just kicking the can down the street again. So my question on that, are you really serious about refixing our infrastructure, or are you more worried about money?
Right.
And to the point is that now that the city is getting this decent funding now, people should be getting tired of all that when they turn on a certain street. Now they gotta back up because work gets done.
Right.
They should be seeing that all the time. You know, work is getting done. They're not seeing that. If they're seeing anything, they're seeing a couple guys standing behind a truck with a shovel with some mix filling in little bottles.
Yeah.
I mean, once again, go on my Facebook page, I got pictures of Homer Street, Center Street, Lincoln Boulevard, Benson Boulevard, Silverwood Court, all over town. These are not potholes. These are streets that need thoroughly repaired.
They're in complete disrepair.
Disrepair. They are. So they're not potholes. The streets is the major, now water bill, as I stated, with the capital improvement plan, it's supposed to be $8 for the next 3 years, $8 per year. But the third year, it'll come out to $24, but they have different sizes of type of pipe of sewer line what you might be using. They were estimated to generate about $3 million out of it at the end of 3 years to be able to take care of that situation. My question is, are you really using the money that it was set up for?
Right.
Or are you sacking some of that off on other areas? Because I'm really concerned about some of the salaries that some of the people that's working. Especially that city manager that's getting a six-figure income. How is that being paid? Is some of that money coming out of the water sewer fund to be able to pay for that? Is this question I have?
Do you have anything you wanted to add on the roads or the water system, anything that we've been discussing here, Chloe?
Not from what I said before. I guess I think, similar to how you guys feel, and, if anything, like I said, in terms of priority and how you mentioned earlier about, beat up cars on the more disrepaired streets, it does feel a bit cyclical in terms of, what we've been talking about, like in 2020 was systemic oppression, if anything, keeping people low at where they're at rather than giving them a better way of life, and, little things like that really improve people's, ability to grow, do better.
So, we're near the end here. I have a couple more things written down. I wanted to talk a little bit, we talked off camera a bit before we started about voter turnout. And I guess one of my concerns is, I think you had mentioned, what was it, 3,000 to 4,000 people who had voted in the last mayoral election. I think the number I have is similar. We had somebody last year do some research on that, and I'll correct myself on this later if I'm wrong, but I'm not that far off. I think it was about 11% of the Freeport population that actually voted in the last mayoral election, and it doesn't seem that our elections are really representative of the community. I have concerns that the issues that caused low voter turnout last time haven't been addressed and fixed in order for us to have better voter turnout this time. So, I guess my question to you would be, what do you think could be done to get more people out to the polls? Keeping in mind that most people who vote early, most people who know who they're going to vote for and are absolutely planning on voting have already voted, right? They did early voting. There are people right now who, hopefully will watch this, who maybe don't plan on going to vote. Maybe don't see it as being that important to them to vote in the local elections, and I think that contributes to the turnout that we see in it. So I'm curious to know what you would do about that, what you think could be done about that.
Well, as me myself, that's something I've always been a concern of mine. There about 4 or 5 elections that I've been involved in city government. And that always been a concern because people do not vote. How do we encourage them to vote? Right now, after this is over, I'm gonna go back out and start hitting on more doors. And right now, people got to go an opportunity to go early vote, to mail in their vote. They don't have to go nowhere, and all they got to do is mail their vote in. One thing I also encourage people is when you go vote, take your kids with you so they can see you vote. So they know when they get to that age that this is what they're supposed to do. Another thing is too that they got to realize, yes, it's good to vote in a national election, but the local election is just as important because that's where you can make a change.
If not more so.
Right. Because that's where you can make a change in the local election. Then also too, are you tired of just sitting back and complaining and not seeing nothing getting done? Evidently you are because you're not voting. Only way you can make a change is go vote. And it only takes 10 to 15 minutes to vote. Unless you got a long line, and the only time you get a long line is if some major issue come up for people to go vote. I always thought it's always good to, in a local election, have something else on the ballot that really draw the interest of the people to vote.
That's a good point.
That's what I always thought, because I thought about trying to come up with something for this, to put something on there that really would draw the people to vote. But even with that, you shouldn't have to come up with that. You shouldn't have to come up with that. Especially me being an African American, that the way we had to scuffle, we had that right to vote. We should be the major ones there to vote. But not only just the African American, but everybody. Women as well.
What do you think, Ron?
Well, I completely agree with everything that he's been saying, but, one thing that, we've actually touched on during this conversation is, transparency of our administration and of our leaders. And I feel like rather, it's always good to say, go vote, go do these things. There's only so many times you can say it before you're falling on deaf ears, if anything. Because the people who are voting, people who aren't going to vote, aren't going to vote. But I feel like there's, we even talked about this, like you said beforehand, of this feeling of like, I don't feel like my vote does anything. It might just be one vote. I feel like if I vote for person A versus person B, it'll be the same outcome, if anything. People aren't being given that transparency into what our government is doing, similar to how we were talking about taxes. We'd be willing to pay more in taxes if we knew what those investments were directly going to. We'd be more interested in voting and being passionate about our leadership if our leadership was transparent about what they're doing and how they're benefiting our citizens and our town as a whole. So I feel like in terms of what our government can do to really do that, in terms of what our government can do is create that incentive by, being that representation for this is what your vote, builds for you. This is what your vote can get you is in that way. Yeah.
Well, that's all I had for, the stuff that I had written down. I had reached out to people on Facebook to see if we could close out with some questions from people in the community. I'm not going to go through all of them. I have a couple I want to touch on. One that I thought was really good. I'm just going to read word for word. Some of our viewers probably know who Carl Ron is. He put it out there on Facebook, so I don't think he'll mind me putting his name on there. So this was a question from Carl Ron. Ronnie, if you are successful in your campaign, what strategies will you employ to ameliorate the long-standing racial chasm in this community? What practical methods can you discuss that will begin to address economic and racial inequity in Freeport?
Well, one, just me being elected, and I'm not running because of it, but just electing me as a black man is a start. Secondly, as a mayor, the mayor is responsible for picking and choosing committees. People own different committees within the city government, that I will make sure that each board and commission is a representative of our city. Both, wherever we're represented. I would like to, if it was possible, to create an office of cultural diversity officer for the city. If I could be able to do that, and then that's come with funding and everything else, but where that person could be able to see that things, not only just in the city government, police, fire, whatever else, that we are meeting that criteria, that we are well representative. I really want to, and then also too, I can't do this by myself. This is going to have to take a whole community working together. If you see something that's not right, you need to speak out on it. I'm not trying to play Superman here, that I'm going to run to the nearest phone booth and change it. But it's just the fact that I think it's going to take all of us working together, not just me. I'm willing to fight whatever injustice there are, but it's going to take all of us working together to solve this issue.
Absolutely. Chloe, what are your thoughts?
I completely agree. I think, in terms of, like you said, we all need to be vocal. We all need to be active in our community. That's one of the things that brought me to this position too, was wanting to have, not just be a voice behind a keyboard, but be a voice that actually was a committee member, that was somebody helping in our community, that was somebody who's speaking up with similar thoughts or progressive thoughts that have the ability to bring forth change.
Awesome. Well, a lot of the other questions actually got addressed. A lot of the other questions that people asked got addressed in our conversation. I'm going to end with one thing. This was a question somebody had sent to Ronnie, and it's a pretty simple one. This is what I'm going to end on. First priority. What's your first priority as mayor?
Well, they look go in right away and make some changes. That's not gonna happen. First of all, I got to get familiarize myself with everybody that's at City Hall. First, I have to sit down and talk with the city manager and see if we can be able to work together, see what he's working on. Then meet with these the department heads, you know. And then meet with each alderman one by one. Because I'm gonna tell you, I'm figuring that I'm gonna run into a lot of roadblocks when I get there. And so therefore I think that we need to meet before things get going, so we can get on, somehow or another we get on the same page where we can be able to work together, to be able to get things done without what I'm envisioning to do. You know. I'm gonna prove the vision, and now I got to be able to persuade you to see the vision to go along with it. So that's what that would be. Will it take 100 days? It might not. But that has to be the first thing I'm gonna have to do is go and sit down and meet with each one and see just where they're at and what's going on. And then look at the, different budget and see how where that's at. So that would be the first thing that I will do.
Okay, sounds good. So, I guess, to wrap this up, just, closing thoughts, Chloe. Anything you want to close on? Maybe mention as far as your campaign goes, and then you're a candidate for trustee for the township.
Definitely. Yeah, I guess it's always fun to talk about these issues in hand and hear what our other candidates are thinking in terms of that. I have a background in a lot of these, like I said, similar social service programs, and passionate about community development. And I'm just really looking forward to offering a fresh set of eyes to a team that could use it. I mean, I think a younger entity on that could really offer a little bit more that could benefit Freeport.
Awesome. Ronnie, final thoughts?
All I have to say is, if you're happy with the last 4 years how Freeport has been going, then I think you need to really rethink it and really look at it and see if everything's really in it and improve. If not, now's the time to make that change. You need to get out and vote on April 6th and vote for me, Ronnie J. Bush.
All right. Thanks, guys. That's going to be it for us. Thanks, guys, for joining us. Our first episode of the Voice of Freeport podcast. Of course, thank Chloe and Ronnie both for participating. Want to thank our crew here at AK Enterprises, which is where we filmed this, for despite a couple of technical difficulties, and of course, for the Voice of Freeport, we plan on doing a lot more discussions like this, and